Hi, I'm Bonnie Browning with the American Quilter Society, and today I'm sitting here with Scott Murkin, who was one of the judges here at AQS QuiltWeek in Paducah. And so, Scott, first of all, I know that you're a certified quilt judge, as am I, through the National Quilting Association, but you have another whole life that you lead. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm a doctor, and I started in family practice many years ago and worked for a lot of years in emergency medicine, and now for the past 4.5 years I've been working in hospice, and I'm now double boarded in family practice and hospice and palliative care. So all of my practice now is 100% hospice care.
And so when you do quilting, do you find that that kind of is a relaxing, take your mind off of work?
It is. It's a sort of retreat for me. I have my own private work area where I can leave all my stuff out all the time, and I can go to it, and if I can only get 20 minutes done, then I can get 20 minutes done. I don't have to take out and put away, and so it's sort of a retreat for me, of a place to sort of regenerate, to be able to give back again. But also, being in a small community in North Carolina, lots of people know about this part of my life, and so it's a bridge to people who have similar passions, and so they often will want to share because of having learned what I do in the quilting world. They'll bring that to me and want to share, and that's a real gift too.
And you also have a family too.
I do. I've been married for 27 years, and I've got 2 children. My first quilts I ever made were for my children, and they're now 23 and 20, so I've been quilting about 21 years.
Long time. Okay, and so let's just talk a little bit about the process we used here at Paducah to judge the shows. First of all, everyone needs to know that we judge in the blind, and that's for obvious reasons, that the judges don't know who made the quilts, and in fact we cover the names, or the quilters cover the names.
Right, so we don't even accidentally see
So
them.
you don't accidentally see who made them. And so then once you start looking at the quilt, tell us what you look at.
Well, the first thing we're looking for is that kind of visual impact, that wow factor of what about this quilt grabs you, and that could be something bright and bold, but it could be something subtle too. But it's something that says, I feel like I can see a little bit of the quilt maker, its personality, or something about them in this quilt. That's what really gets our attention. And then you start kind of digging down deeper to what decisions were made, how the design, all the parts work together, and then how well was it accomplished? How well was the idea brought to fruition? What's the quality of the needlework and the workmanship, and that everything kind of comes together to make one cohesive whole.
So the process that we use, and particularly when we get ready to choose the winners, we ask the judges to choose 6 quilts in every category, because we would have a first, second, a third, and an honorable, and then 2 more places in case something wins another award and gets bumped up.
So we don't have to go back and look at them all over again.
And so like for the large quilts, the 9 categories were all judged individually, and you chose the first through 6 places in all those categories, and then the AQS staff held up the first place winners in all those categories to choose the best to show. So tell us how tough that was.
Really, really tough. We use what's broadly referred to as an elimination system. So as we look at the quilts, we weed out the weakest ones until we have fewer and fewer and fewer, and we're down to the last few. But this is AQS in Paducah, so the weakest ones are still really good quilts.
Yes.
And so they're just not as good as the ones that made it into the successive levels. And so we do our best to look at what things really are advancing the art form and get down to those last few, and that's when the staff holds them up for us, so we can get an idea of what they're going to look like from the viewer's vantage point when they're here to see them, so that we're seeing what they're seeing when the quilts are hanging. And then very intense discussions among the 3 of us to say what we're seeing, why. There's no flipping coins. It's we've got to talk through to the other 2 people and tell them what we're seeing and why this quilt is the one that should rise up in the rankings.
And of course, we always have 3 judges,
Right.
and we do that on purpose because you can't have a tie.
Exactly.
2 against 1 wins, right?
And there comes a point where you've done all the talking you can do, and you've made your points, and now you each say which quilt you think should get it, and 2 out of 3 wins.
That's right.
Although a considerable amount of the time, all 3 of us, there are some clear winners, and there's, if we all 3 agree, then you don't have to discuss a lot.
That's right. Well, and so one of the things that we do here that's a little bit different from other judgings is that we call what we call drop the quilts. How did you like that? And tell us about that.
I liked it very much. When we had the quilts down to the last 8, 9, 10 quilts and we needed to pick those final 6, the staff would hold all of them up, and they held them up in such a way that we couldn't see the front of the quilt until everyone was ready. And then someone would give the signal, drop the quilts, and you got to see them all at the same time. And so it was almost like a refresh on your computer, where now I'm seeing them all new again. And if 2 of them were open and they were getting the others ready, it's like I'd have more time to study those, and it'd be hard to tear my attention away. And so when they drop them, you very quickly get that initial visual impact all over again, like a new fresh start.
And it helps you make your decision.
And it does help,
doesn't it?
Very often it's
Yes.
very clarifying to say, okay, we were really torn, but oh man, pop, okay, that one's
And once
clearly,
you see that one come down
Right.
in conjunction with all the
when
others.
when all 8 of them are being released at the same time, you can tell which one your vision gets torn to. Whereas if they were done one at a time, you don't have that same boom all at once.
Do you know, I thought that the large wall quilts pictorial was the strongest category I have ever seen.
I could come very close to that of anywhere at any show.
Yes.
Yes.
And there
ridiculous.
There could have
challenging.
been 15 quilts could have won, or in another show would have won.
Absolutely.
That was a tough category for you.
Yeah, there were
all.
a dozen or more quilts in that category that at any regional or local show would have been best of show. I mean, that was just, and I compare it to the Olympics, when the difference between first place and second place at the Olympics can be like 0.001 seconds.
Yes.
That's sort of, in some shows it's like first, second, third. Here it's like first, second, the difference between 1 and 2 and 3 is almost immeasurably small.
Yes.
It's just such a
and
tiny
in fact,
difference.
in some cases, you all had the scribes read the comments so that you
Right,
could
to
refresh your
right.
memory, so
Exactly.
that gave you a way to help weed out some of the quilts because they were all good.
Exactly.
Yes. All right, well, so which was your favorite category in the whole show?
I really am enjoying seeing the modern quilts, and so that's something that's in evolution. So I really like seeing what the modern quilters are calling modern today, knowing that it was a little different yesterday and it'll be a little different tomorrow. So I just think that's fascinating. It's a new young movement, and it's still growing up. And so that's really fun to me to see which ways it's going, because it's going to be different at every show.
Doesn't it kind of remind you when the art quilters first started coming on the scene in the shows? Before that it was all very traditional.
Exactly.
And then we had the art quilters come in, and now we have the modern quilters
Right.
coming in. And so it's just different.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so that, to me, I'm still formulating my own mental category of what that is. And so to see a lot of different examples is helpful for me.
Let's talk a little bit about judges not imposing their own personal likes and dislikes when they're judging, because sometimes that's hard, but that's
It
something
is.
a professional judge needs to do.
Absolutely. It's a constant challenge that we have to remind ourselves that, and many people, including local guild members who I've never been able to convince that quilt show judging isn't anything different than saying which ones you like the best. And even though I've known them for 15 years, they still, it's clear I can explain to them, and they still don't believe me. That it's just, I like that one, I don't like that one. And we have really specific criteria that we have honed down over time, that we know when a design has good balance and good rhythm and good proportion and scale. And even if it may be a style I would never work in, or a subject matter that I would never approach, I can still recognize when it's done well. And the analogy I use, I have an analogy for everything. The analogy I use on that one is, my son loves heavy metal music, and I go to a lot of shows with him from when he was too young to go by himself. He's old enough now, but I still like to go anyway. I don't every day listen to that kind of music, but I go to shows with him. I've been to enough shows where I can tell when they're doing it well and when they're not. But I don't go around listening to that kind of music every day, but I still can recognize good quality metal music and not good quality. And that's the same thing with any art medium, but with quilting. I've looked at a lot of quilts, and I can tell and express in my words when a design is working and why not.
Yes.
And so if you have a judge at your local show who at the end of the show they happen to not like pink or a certain style of quilt, then they probably haven't put their very best effort forward, because ideally you would have no idea of that.
because it really, if she used pink well, she might have been the winner.
Absolutely. And I would say sometimes I even have a slight tendency, if I see something that's different than I do done exceptionally well, you might get a little extra credit for that just because of the fact that, to me, that was hard. So,
how about judging traditional designs versus innovative original designs?
the criteria are very similar. All of the language of design is fairly universal, so we're still going to look. I think the difference might be in the weighting. So in a quilt that was very traditional, a little more weight might be given to the symmetry and the balance and maybe the fine workmanship. Whereas in an art quilt or a more innovative quilt, maybe we're gonna look at everything, but maybe we're gonna weight things like negative space and rhythm and balance and proportion a little more heavily. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a tipping point.
But sometimes when we're judging, the judges don't agree, and I like this one and you like that one, and so how do we mesh those two things together when we're judging?
With the smaller wall quilts, we parade them by so we get to see what they're going to look like, and we have a chance right then to sort of say which are the stronger and weaker. But if we find a quilt that we put in the weaker category that as you examine it more, sort of its nuances come out to you, then we can sort of save that quilt and put it back in the stronger pile. Having 3 judges, we talked about, eliminates a tie, mm-hmm. and very often what we have is one judge who feels strongly one way, one who feels strongly another way, and the one sitting on the fence, and the two people in the ears saying why they should vote their way. And so that person then kind of holds the power in their hand for that one moment, but it rotates who that person is, so it's going to be a different person for each quilt.
Well, and sometimes when you're doing the initial screening, we're
Right.
going to accept or we're going to release. Sometimes when we have 2 people that they don't really know and one person wants it, we always bring that quilt
Correct.
back.
At that early stage, if even one person says yes, then that's a look at again.
Yes, we want to see it one more time, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do with it the next round.
And if there's a quilt in a really strong category that just can't get a ribbon because there's no more to give, then that's where you can pull a save with your Judge's Choice ribbon, and you can always give it to any quilt that you want, but you only get one. And I think part of the problem with the word like is that we mean different things by it. So if you happen to like well-made, well-designed quilts, that's going to work out fine for the judging. And I do. So I try really hard not to use the word like when I'm judging because it gets misinterpreted. So when I say I like a certain quilt, what I really mean is that quilt is really well designed and well made. And so I try to say that instead of that I like it, because it could be misinterpreted.
And of course here in Paducah, this is the only show we do where we do written comments about the quilts. And so we try to get the judges to give us a couple positive comments and a couple constructive comments. So let's just talk a little bit about the wording and the phrasing that we use on that.
We try to make the comments as specific as they can be to that particular quilt and not sort of generic catchphrases. Some things show up often enough that you do get some phrasing that repeats just because there's certain parts that are hard. Mm-hmm. Keeping long straight lines straight is hard, and bindings can be challenging, and so certain things show up over and over. But we try to make the wording as specific as it can be and as helpful as it can be. Personally, I think it's important to let quilters know what they did right, because very often we don't give ourselves credit for the things we did right. We've picked apart every little thing that we think might be a flaw, but we may not have given ourselves full credit. So I really like to give quilters credit for the things they did well. And most quilters at this level want to know if there's a way they can improve. And so kind of giving them that guidance, I use a lot of should phrases. Bindings should be filled with batting, long seams should be straight, so that they know kind of what the criteria are that we're using. So it's kind of a little verbal clue of when you enter your quilt the next time, this is what we're looking at, so it helps them know.
Okay, so to just kind of conclude, how did you enjoy your gig here at AQS?
Oh, it's been the
judging?
best time. Loved it, had a great time. The staff is very consistent from year to year, so they have this like an oiled machine, and so you can come in and really focus on just doing your job. The mechanics of everything happening is taken care of by someone else, so you just get to focus on picking which quilts are the finest examples really anywhere in the world today of the quilting art.
And you and I both have judged enough quilts in a church basement where you have to unfold the quilt yourself. So
exactly, or
this,
someone's dining room.
Yes,
or, right.
Yes.
So having all the mechanical parts taken care of and a system that, you know, and every show has a slight variation on their system, and so having a system that works for your show, for your quilts, and for your team, it was a true pleasure.
Well, and so what advice would you like to give to the quilters about entering a judged contest at AQS?
Well, the first step to being in a judge contest is getting accepted, and that means you've got to have photographs that look like your quilts. That's a whole step before me is the jurying process. So you've got to have photographs. If you can do that, and a lot of people have enough photographic skill to do that, and if you can't, get some help. Find a tutorial online, find a friend who's got photography skills, or even hire a photographer if that's what it takes. But make sure that your photographs are a good representation. Make sure your quilts are clean and don't smell like anything other than quilts. And just really put your best effort forward.
Well, and I would just add to that, be sure you measure your quilt because
and read the entry rules.
and read the rules, because we had a couple quilts that we couldn't hang because they didn't follow the rules, but we often have quilts that get disqualified before we ever get to this point because
and that's always
the
sad because they went to the effort to fill out the entry form and pay the fee and ship it, and then it doesn't fit the category. So
measure your quilt.
Measure your quilt and read the rules twice.
All right, and so I hope that you'll check out the rules. We're working on the rules for 2016, and we hope that we'll see some quilts from you, and one of these days we'll bring Scott back and let him judge again with us.
I look forward to it.
Thanks.